Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a little thought experiment. Just close your eyes for a second and visualize the brain.
What do you see?
Yeah, what do you see? I mean, if you're like me, and let's be honest, probably like 99% of people listening, you're picturing something, well, mechanical.
A processor.
Yeah.
A biological computer.
Totally. A computer.
It's the metaphor of our age. We can't really help it. We talk about processing information, retrieving data, hardwiring. We treat the mind like it's just software running on a wet motherboard.
Exactly. But today, we are going to take a sledgehammer to that metaphor. We have a huge stack of research here, everything from neurodynamical systems theory to the results of this high-stakes adversarial collaboration between rival consciousness theories.
And even some incredibly dense new math on the geometry of feeling.
Right. And it all points to one big conclusion. The computer metaphor isn't just a little bit off. It's actively blocking us from understanding what consciousness actually is.
That's the headline. The brain isn't running static code. It's not a chip flipping ones and zeros. The sources we're diving into today describe the brain as a chaotic, fluid storm.
A storm.
And your consciousness. That's not the output of a calculation. It's more like a specific type of weather pattern inside that storm.
Oh, weather pattern. I like that image, but it also sounds, I don't know, a bit abstract. So our mission today is to ground this. We really need to figure out why a conscious moment is mathematically different from a machine learning algorithm.
And what it actually means to live on what they call the edge of chaos.
It's a huge shift in thinking.
It is. We have to move from thinking about, logic gates to thinking about physics and thermodynamics.
So let's start with that landscape. If I shouldn't be visualizing circuits and logic gates, what image should I replace it with? Storm is good for the feeling, but how do neuroscientists actually map this thing?
Okay, so you need to move from engineering to topography. Think about maps. The core concept in this field is something called neural state space.
Neural state space. Okay, break that down for us.
Imagine a vast, high-dimensional landscape.
Yeah.
Your brain has billions of neurons, right?
Right.
At any single millisecond, every one of those neurons has a specific firing rate. If you could plot all of those billions of data points as a single coordinate, you'd get one dot in this massive space.
So that one dot is me in this exact instant.
That dot is you. Yes. If you're looking at your coffee cup, that's one point on the map. If you're remembering your grandmother's house, that's a totally different point.
And thinking is just the movement of that point?
Precisely. It's a trajectory. You are literally traveling across this landscape. But, and this is where the map analogy gets really important, this landscape isn't flat. It has terrain. It has hills and it has deep valleys.
And these are the attractors I kept seeing in the papers.
That's the term. Think of a valley or a basin. If you roll a ball near a valley, gravity naturally pulls it down to the bottom, right?
Sure.
In the brain, an attractor is a pattern of activity that your neural networks just naturally want to settle into. It's a stable state.
Okay, so let's apply this. When I'm trying to remember the name of a song and it's on the tip of my tongue, is my brain kind of circling the rim of that valley?
That is a perfect way to picture it. The system is unstable. It's orbiting. Yeah. And when you finally get it, oh, it's Bohemian Rhapsody, the ball drops to the bottom. Yeah. It stabilizes.
And that stability is the thought.
That is the thought.
But this process, it doesn't feel instant. I mean, sometimes it does, but the research describes a very specific cycle for how this happens. A conscious moment isn't just a flash, is it?
No. And this is where the computer metaphor really, really breaks down. Computers execute instructions. The brain goes through this dynamic cycle. The sources describe a 4-step process for a single moment of awareness.
Okay, walk us through it.
Step 1 is anchoring. That's just raw sensory input hitting the system. Light hits your retina, sound hits your eardrum.
Got it.
Step 2 is expansion. That input doesn't just get filed away. It triggers this massive spray of associations, memories, predictions. The trajectory widens out across the state space.
That's the storm part you mentioned. The brain is looking for options.
It is. Then comes step 3, suspension. And this is fascinating. The brain briefly holds all these multiple interpretations in tension. It hasn't decided what it's seeing yet. It's a moment of high energy and, well, conflict.
So for a split second, my brain doesn't know if I'm looking at a cat or a dog.
Your brain is entertaining both possibilities at once. And then step 4, the collapse. The system falls into one specific stable attractor. That moment of stabilization, that is conscious perception. It's a cat.
Wow. It sounds so much more physical than just processing data. It feels like physics, like a ball finally finding a resting spot.
It is physics, and that is the fundamental difference between you and, let's say, ChatGPT. Machine learning uses what we call feed-forward layers. Data goes in one end, flows through fixed weights, and comes out the other.
It's a one-way street.
It's a one-way street designed to minimize error. But the brain is all about recurrent loops. It's constantly evolving in real time. It's not trying to minimize error against some training set. It's seeking what's called metastability in a constantly changing world.
Metastability. That sounds like it's stable, but only for a second, like balancing a broom on your hand.
Perfect analogy. If it were too stable like a rock, you'd never change your mind, you'd be rigid. If it were too unstable, you'd just be chaos. Which brings us to probably the most important concept in this whole deep dive, criticality.
The edge of chaos. I mean, that's the title of our show today, and it sounds very dramatic. But practically, what does it mean for my brain to be at the edge of chaos?
It means the conscious brain operates at the exact phase transition between order and disorder. Imagine water right at its boiling point. It's not really liquid, not really steam. It's turbulent, bubbling.
And incredibly sensitive to any tiny change.
That's the whole point. You have to be that sensitive. If you're too ordered, you can't adapt. If you're too chaotic, you can't function.
Yeah.
And the sources give two, frankly, terrifying examples of what happens when we fall off this edge.
Okay, let's look at the order side first, because normally we think of order as a good thing. But the research says if the brain gets too organized, we lose consciousness.
Yes. Look at a generalized seizure. If
Yeah.
you analyze the math of a grand mal seizure, the brain enters what's called a supercritical state. The activity becomes incredibly synchronized. Every neuron is marching in lockstep.
It's too organized.
It's periodic, repetitive, and highly, highly ordered. And the
We'll
result,
blackout.
instant unconsciousness. Because the information richness just collapses.
Hmm.
I mean, if everyone in a stadium is shouting the exact same word at the exact same time, you're not communicating anything complex. The system is too stable. It's stuck.
That is so counterintuitive. A seizure looks like chaos from the outside with the body shaking, but inside the brain, it's actually a rigid lockstep.
Yeah.
What's on the other side? Too much chaos.
That's the subcritical state. This is what happens under certain types of anesthesia, specifically with GABAergic agents. The whole network just fragments. The trajectory of your thoughts just bounces around randomly. No attractors can hold.
The ball can't find a valley. It just keeps rolling around forever.
Exactly. So waking consciousness, you, me talking right now, is this incredible tightrope walk. We are weakly chaotic. You're stable enough to hold a sentence in your head, but unstable enough to react instantly if a loud noise startles you.
You know, this actually explains something from the reading about psychedelics, the entropic brain hypothesis. I've always wondered why those experiences feel so expansive.
It's directly related to this landscape model. The idea is that normal waking life requires us to suppress a certain amount of entropy. We have to filter out the noise just to get things done.
Right. You can't be marveling at the geometric structure of a leaf if you need to drive a car to work.
You'd never get anywhere. We wear blinders to be functional. But primary states, things like REM sleep or a psychedelic experience, they push the brain closer to that critical point. They increase the entropy. The landscape literally flattens out.
Flattens out. You mean the valleys get shallower.
Exactly. The deep, well-worn valleys of your rigid beliefs or your traumatic memories, they become shallower. It becomes easier for the ball to roll out of them and explore new parts of the map.
So that boundless feeling people report isn't just poetic. It's a literal description of the mathematical constraints being loosened. You're exploring the state space without the usual guardrails.
Which can be therapeutic or it can be terrifying, depending on the person.
Yeah.
But it's all just physics.
That makes a lot of sense. But I want to pivot here because we've talked about landscapes and chaos, which explains the mechanics of thinking how we move from state to state, but it doesn't explain the feeling.
The hard problem.
The hard problem, right? Why does red look like red? Why does pain hurt? You can have a map of a valley, but the map itself doesn't feel like falling. How does this new research even begin to bridge that gap?
This is where we get into the most challenging, but I think the most beautiful part of the stack. A theory called the geometry of qualia.
Okay, I read this section 3 times. It talks about principal bundle geometry. I'm going to need you to unpack this very gently. How can geometry be a feeling?
It sounds incredibly abstract, I know, but stick with me. The theory proposes that subjective feelings, qualia, are literally encoded in the geometric structure of these neural manifolds. It breaks experience down into a hierarchy.
Okay, start at the bottom.
At the very bottom, you have modality. This is the basic difference between, say, seeing color and hearing a sound. Mathematically, this is defined by something called a symmetry group. Think of this as the rigid architecture of the space.
Something I can't change.
You can't learn to see sound. Evolution baked that geometry into your hardware. It's the canvas you get to paint on.
Okay, so the type of feeling is the rigid structure of the room. What about the specific things I see? You know, the difference between a dog and a cat.
That's the next level up, the signature, the identity. This is defined by what's called a quotient space. And unlike the symmetry group, this space is plastic. It's malleable.
Because I had to learn what a dog looks like.
Exactly. When you learn, you are literally warping the geometry of this quotient space to create a distinct shape that represents dog. You are carving a new valley into the landscape.
So when I see a golden retriever, my brain activity is traveling along a specific curve, a geodesic, I think they called it, on this shape that I built through my own experience.
Yes, and the theory claims that consciousness is the system perceiving that flow along the curve. The geometry dictates the feeling. If the curve is sharp and jagged, maybe it feels like dissonance. If it's smooth and harmonic, maybe it feels like a major chord.
It implies that feelings aren't magic. They're just geometry. Which, of course, leads to the huge question. If we can describe it with math, can we build it? But before we get to AI, we have to talk about the showdown.
The cogitate adversarial collaboration. Yes, we cannot skip this.
This was a huge deal in the neuroscience world. I mean, usually science is so slow. Someone publishes a paper, someone else ignores it for 10 years. This was different. They took the two heavyweights integrated information theory, or INT, and global neuronal workspace, GNW, and basically locked them in a room.
It was a boxing match funded by the Templeton Foundation. They said, okay, you both claim to explain consciousness. We're going to run one experiment where you both predict exactly what the brain will do. And if you're wrong, you have to admit it.
High stakes. So just to remind everyone, IIT basically says consciousness is about the structure of connections in the back of the brain. GNW says it's about broadcasting information from the front of the brain. So who won?
That's the kicker.
Don't tell me.
Neither of them.
They both failed.
They both failed on key predictions. IIT predicted that the back of the brain, the posterior cortex, would stay synchronized in this very specific way. It stayed active, sure, but the synchronization wasn't there. GNW predicted a specific ignition of the frontal cortex at a specific time, and it just didn't happen reliably.
So the two main maps we've been using for 20 years are both wrong.
Or at least very incomplete. But this failure is actually driving a massive pivot in the field. And this brings us to the most exciting part of the research we read. Researchers are looking at something more fundamental in information. They're looking at energy.
Thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics.
This is the entropica and the gentropy stuff. This felt the most sci-fi to me.
It does, but it's grounded in basic physics.
Yeah.
Think about the second law of thermodynamics. The universe wants to dissolve into disorder. Entropy always increases.
A hot cup of coffee always cools down.
It never spontaneously heats up. Chaos is the default destination. But life resists. Life is weird. And this new perspective suggests that consciousness is a localized ignition of intelligent order. It's a mechanism to fight entropy.
An negentropic ignition. It sounds like a weapon from a movie, but it's actually what we're doing right now.
That's a weapon against decay. One of the sources calls it persistence theory. The idea is that when the world surprises us, when there's an entropy breach and our predictions fail, the brain has to work incredibly hard to repair its model of reality.
It has to burn energy to make sense of the surprise.
A lot of energy. It works to restore what they call mutual information with the world. And here's the poetic part. The theory suggests that qualia, the feeling of pain or redness or shock, is the thermodynamic residue of that repair process.
Wait, hang on. I want to make sure I get this. Are you saying my feelings are just the exhaust heat of my brain fighting the second law of thermodynamics?
In a way, yes. Feelings are the felt trace of the immense computational work required to stay organized in a chaotic universe. You literally feel the effort of existing.
That is profound. It makes consciousness feel like a struggle, a constant active process. And it frames the whole AI question in a completely different light. Because if consciousness is this thermodynamic repair job, what does that mean for ChatGPT?
Well, it leads us directly to what one source calls the no-go theorem.
A no-go theorem sounds pretty definitive.
It's a very strong argument from the sources that says,
Yeah.
no, digital AI as it's currently built cannot be conscious. And it's not because the code isn't smart enough. It's because the hardware doesn't matter to the code.
Explain that, because I can run the same software on a Mac or a PC, and it works the same. Why does that matter here?
Because in a computer, the software and the hardware is separate. The code implies a logical structure, but it doesn't care if the chip is hot or cold, or if it's made of silicon or carbon. The physical state of the transistor is just a switch. It's an abstraction. But in the brain, they are scale inseparable. The computation is the biological state. The metabolic energy levels of a neuron are part of the calculation. You cannot separate the program from the meat.
So you can't upload a mind because the mind is the physical wetware interacting with itself.
That's the argument. And there's a second part, causal power. Digital systems are designed to be prediction machines. They simulate things. But for consciousness to exist, the sources argue, the system must have volitional causal power.
It has to be able to actually change its own future.
And it has to have a reason to. The brain is a volitional subsystem that evolved for one reason: survival. Its intelligence is grounded in its constant need to manage its own metabolism.
Ah.
An AI doesn't really care if you unplug it. There's
Okay.
no metabolic grounding. It has no skin in the game when it comes to entropy.
That's the key phrase for me, skin in the game. Because AI doesn't have to fight for its own energetic survival, it doesn't generate that thermodynamic residue that we call feeling.
That is the gist of it. Without the constant struggle against entropy, there's no one home to feel the success or failure of that struggle. An AI can simulate the geometry of redness, but it isn't burning energy to maintain that geometry against a chaotic universe.
It's simulating the storm, but it isn't getting wet.
Spot on.
This has been, well, mind-bending is the only word for it. It really changes how you look in the mirror. You don't just see a face, you see a thermodynamic engine.
It changes the definition of who you even are.
We started with this simple idea of the brain as a computer, but we've ended up somewhere totally different. The brain is a landscape. It's a storm balancing on a knife edge.
And we've learned that our feelings might be geometric structures, and our awareness might just be the heat generated by our constant battle to exist.
It leads to the final thought I want to leave everyone with, this concept from the sources of the beautiful loop.
Active inference.
Right. They talk about this loop where the system is continuously proving to itself that it exists. So if consciousness is the process of fighting entropy, then we aren't just processing data, we are actively, physically resisting the dissolution of the universe, moment by moment.
Every time you perceive something, every time you have a coherent thought, you are creating a tiny pocket of order in a dying universe.
We are the resistance. I love that. Thank you so much for guiding us through this storm today.
My pleasure. It was fun.
And thank you for listening. Keep resisting entropy, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.